All right, come on in, everybody. Let me know if you can hear me. Let me know where you're watching from. I got a few things to say here about what's going on with the debt and the shutdown and all this stuff. And just kind of wanted to jump on here and kind of lay it out for you the way I see it. You can tell me if you think I'm crazy or wrong or whatever, if you see it differently. But I just think what's happening right now is based in a lot of disinformation, and I think we need kind of a new way of looking at things. And I just kind of wanted to lay out how I see it loud and clear. Listening from Texas. Awesome. Great to see you. Cuckoo for Truth. I am too. Vicky's loud and clear. Hello. All right, cool. Awesome. Before I get into it, I just want to say, as always, we are sponsored by Elisa Parker if you're buying or selling a home in Middle Tennessee, and Abby Rubenfeld if you need a lawyer. She's a rock star. Go to Abby. And Bongo Java is our coffee sponsor. Okay, so let's get into this. So right now, as we speak, there's this big chaos in Washington where there was a bipartisan government funding deal between Republicans in the Senate and the House and Democrats in the Senate and the House. There was a lot in it. It was like 1,500 pages, which is obviously not great. Dropped at the last minute. Also not great, but that's how things work there. And even Speaker Johnson was kind of on board for it. And then, of course, President Elon Musk, and we'll get to that in a minute, comes out and says this should not pass. And then all hell broke loose. And it became pretty clear that it wasn't going to pass. House Republicans fell in line. And here, I think this is it. This bill should not pass. So he drops this. And then Republicans spent the rest of the day yesterday basically saying they're not going to support it. So that fell apart. Now a lot of them are calling for a quote unquote clean CR, continuing resolution, meaning they'll keep it going through, March or next year or something like that. And now President Trump is saying that he also wants the debt ceiling to be raised as a part of that deal. So all of this comes back to this notion that we have all this debt, this $30 trillion in debt. And because of that, we have to be terrified about spending any money. We have to cut Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, which is what Republicans are openly saying they want to do now, like this guy right here.
We're going to just keep asking members of the caucus as they come in, sir, can we get a pledge to stand with President Trump against cuts to Social Security and Medicare benefits?
I think, you know what, when we look to reduce our national debt, I think these should be on the table.
Okay.
So I am a strong advocate of discussing this and reevaluating them. And I do believe at the end of the day, there will be some cuts.
There are cuts to Social Security and Medicare.
Yes.
And that's
okay. So Republicans are saying they want to cut Social Security and Medicare. Meanwhile, their God, Donald Trump, said this.
And I will not cut one penny from Social Security or Medicare.
So when they were running, they knew that was a bad idea. But now they're for it. And their justification for it, as Gloria says, Republicans can't govern. Hey, from Puerto Rico, Gloria, Merry Christmas. But when he was running, they said, we're not going to cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security because they know that's unpopular. But now they're in there and they're saying, okay, we got to look at cutting this. And their justification is the debt, right? But one way they don't actually care about the debt is that while they're doing this, they're also going to cut tax cuts for the rich and corporations. So anytime anybody talks about how they're going to cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security because, oh my God, the debt, you have to also mention that they are going to cut taxes for the rich and corporations because our debt is a math problem. Our deficit is a math problem. If you take in less than you're putting out, that's debt, that's deficits, right? So this is an equation. And if they're not willing to raise more revenue, bring in more money, they don't really care about the debt. And that's my point. They don't really care about the debt. And one way you know they don't really care about the debt is that now Trump is out there talking about erasing the debt ceiling, which is actually a good idea. We should do that. And you see, here's Chris Hayes laughing that Trump is now talking about getting rid of the debt ceiling, which is something that Democrats have been talking about. And the debt ceiling, what is the debt ceiling, right? The debt ceiling is just basically when we spend money that we pay our bills. That's the debt ceiling. That's us raising the debt so that we can pay the bills for the money that Congress has approved, which we should always do, because if we don't do that, what's it called? What's it called when you don't pay your credit card bills? It's called default. And if our country defaults, our economy crashes. That's bad. So we shouldn't have a debt ceiling because we have the money. And that's my point here. We are not broke. We are the richest country in the world. We are not broke. My entire life, they have been telling us we're broke. When the debt was $1 trillion, they told us we were broke. And here we are at $31 trillion. Where'd that money come from? We found it somewhere, right? It's because we're not broke. We are the opposite of broke. We print our own money. And whenever they want the money to go to war, to fund the military, they magically find the money, right? We're only broke when we want to do things that help regular people. Healthcare for all, infrastructure, clean energy, housing. That's when we're broke. We're not broke when it comes to the military. In fact, they just easily passed 85-14, easily passed a bipartisan military spending bill, record amount of $895 billion. Literally while we are having this discussion about the CR, they passed that easily. So this idea that we're broke because we're in debt is absolute nonsense, okay? And we have posted a few times recently a link to a trailer for a movie called Finding the Money, which is a documentary about this very thing. And the thesis of the movie, which I will try to explain to you right here, and I highly encourage you go watching it because it is really informative. It's about the fact that the way that we look at our debt is wrong, because our deficit and our debt is really just the amount of money that is being put into our economy. So when we run a deficit as a government, we run a surplus as an economy. Every dollar our government puts out goes into the economy. This idea that we're $31 trillion in debt, as though China holds $31 trillion of our debt and can foreclose on us at any moment, that is not how it works. That is not true. Yes, China holds some of our debt because they took in dollars and then bought treasuries, and that gets a whole complicated thing. But I'm trying to keep it simple and basically just tell you that the way that we look at our debt is wrong. We are only looking at half the ledger. Now, what this does not mean is that we can just spend any amount of money and it doesn't matter. It does matter. What matters is inflation. That's what we should be looking at. But as long as inflation is reined in, which currently it is right now, and we can talk about other aspects of that, that's what we should be worried about. But we should not let this debt fear mongering by people like Marsha Blackburn and Tim Burchett, who just want to shut it down because we're broke and blah, blah, blah. Look at this is Tim Burchett today. Shut it down. Because Tim Burchett, this is all he ever knows how to say. If you ask Tim Burchett, what's the right amount of debt that we're supposed to have as the richest country in the world, he'll have no idea. If you ask him what he wants to cut out of the budget, he'll have no idea. If you ask him if he'll tax the rich and corporations, he'll say no, because he doesn't care about the debt. He just likes to say, shut it down. No. We could send anybody up to Washington to do Burchett's job. And in fact, if we sent nobody up to Washington, we'd be better off, rather than having Burchett up there saying no all the time and peddling disinformation. We are not broke. Stop letting them tell you we are broke. Inflation is what we should be looking at, not the debt. That's the point. It does not mean we can spend however much money we want no matter what. What it means is we should be looking at what we spend it on and the impact that it has on inflation, it can be deflationary. For instance, one of the biggest issues that we have right now, one of the highest costs, one of the things that I think is really giving people problems and making people angry is housing costs. It costs a lot of money to live, to rent. It costs a lot of money to buy a house. Not, young people who are coming out of college, they can't even afford to buy homes right now. So what would be a good use of our money since we're not broke? Well, if we spent to build a bunch of housing, that's when we go build 1 million homes and we put people to work doing that. That's a good use of money for the richest country in the world. You know what is not a good use of money for the richest country in the world? More tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy. Why? Well, there's a reason. The reason is because what is good for this country? What's good for this country is growth. There's no downside to growth. That economic growth is good. Well, what's holding us back more than anything? Exorbitant amounts of inequality holds us back more than anything. When people can't afford to buy the stuff that's out there, when people can't afford to go see a doctor when they're sick, when people can't afford an emergency and go broke in those situations. So we should be spending our money to shrink inequality, to help the middle class, to help people, not make it worse. And what does cutting Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security do? It makes it worse. So they are using our debt as an excuse to do things that will actually make things worse. That's what's going on right now. The debt is not the issue that people think it is. And so I highly encourage people to go watch Finding the Money, because it goes into this in a very understandable way. I'm going to play you a little bit of the trailer right now.
So much of the public discourse, it's like we're going through life with one eye shut and one eye open, and we're only getting half the picture. And then somebody like me comes in and says, let's make sure we see the full picture. People naturally think, wait, government deficit, this is a negative thing. Let's stop this right now. And I say, hang on, let's open the other eye.
The government debt is not a burden on anyone.
The national debt is exactly the opposite of what the orthodox story tells us.
This modern monetary theory.
Okay, so it's kind of crazy, right? You're like, wait, we've been thinking about this all wrong. But if you just look at that ledger that she just showed, where one side of the ledger is the debt and the other side is the surplus into the economy, it starts to make a lot of sense. The money doesn't just disappear, it goes into the economy. And who are we borrowing it from, quote unquote? And here's another part of this. Who are we borrowing it from? We're borrowing it from ourselves. And why do we do that? Why do we borrow it from ourselves? That's a really good question. And you know who can't even answer it? This is Biden's top economic guy. This is Biden's top economic guy trying to answer this basic question.
Government can't go bankrupt because we can print our own money.
It obviously begs the question, why exactly are we borrowing in a currency that we print ourselves? I'm waiting for someone to stand up and say, why do we borrow our own currency in the first place?
Like you said, they print the dollar. So why does the government even borrow?
Well, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do?
I mean, look at this guy.
They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds. Government can't go
bank. Y'all, look at this guy. It's such a basic question. Why do we borrow from ourselves? And this is Biden's, chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, President Joe Biden, just got asked a very basic question. Why do we borrow, quote unquote, borrow from ourselves? And he had a hard time answering that. Okay. And so the point is not that we can spend a lot of money and unlimited amounts of money. That is not the point. The point is that the terms that we use, borrow and debt, they're negative and they make us think that we're broke. They make us think there's nothing left. Panic, cut Medicare, cut Medicaid, shut the government down. And they feed into people like Steve Bannon, who wants to shut it down. And this is, I think, the key for what's happening right now. This is what I want you guys to understand right now. Shutting down the government, which is what people like Steve Bannon want, and defaulting on our debt potentially, which I think is potentially what Elon Musk wants. These people are not looking out for us. These people are looking
Johnson's
out
a Democrat.
for themselves. So listen.
They help Johnson's a Democrat.
Johnson's a Democrat, right? He's calling Johnson a Democrat because Johnson wanted to keep the government open, right? So he's a Democrat, which is like the worst thing you could be in Bannon world, because he wants to keep the government open. These guys want the government shut down. They want us to default. They don't care what happens to the economy, all because of this notion that we're broke and the debt is, we should panic over the debt. Right? And who benefits from this stuff? That's what we need to ask ourselves. And let's get to that in a moment. But again, here's the Grinch, Steve Bannon.
They help Johnson's a Democrat. He's a Democrat. He holds the Bible. He's got the New Testament wrapped up tight. He can talk happy talk on a handful of social issues, checking his son's porn site. I don't know, all this crazy nonsense. He does all that. He goes down there. He's a big, deep Christian. Except when it comes to showing courage and being courageous and maybe bringing people in so it's not a surprise. So now the media can sit there with a big old shotgun to your head and go, oh my gosh, no Social Security checks. It's going to be cold. It's going to be dark for Christmas Day. Granny's going to freeze. The parks are going to be closed. Smithsonian is not going to be open on Christmas Eve. Not going to get any mail. No Christmas presents going to go over. CNN's going to have that big camera everywhere. Kids crying. No Santa.
He wants the government shut down. This is what he wants. This is what Musk wants. And Musk potentially wants us to default on our debt too, as this guy Dave Troy, who you guys should check out, has been saying this for a long time. Why? Why do they want us to shut the government down? Why do they want us to default? They're not looking out for us. They're not looking out for the workers, the millions of workers that aren't going to get paychecks. They're not looking out for us. And, I can think of a few nefarious reasons. I mean, obviously, Musk has a direct line to Putin, as we all know. He can't get security clearances from the Air Force, contact with foreign nationals. And meanwhile, they want to install this guy as speaker. Now, Rand Paul is saying. That's not it. There it is. Rand Paul is now saying they want to install this guy as speaker. So they're going to put a guy as speaker with a direct line to Putin who can't get security clearances and is openly advocating for us to shut the government down and default. This is where we are right now. And the reason I'm talking about the debt is because at the end of the day, that is their excuse for all of this. This notion that we are broke, that we can't print our own money. Yes, we can. We do. We have my entire life. That's what we do. They've been saying we're broke forever. Since the beginning, they've been saying we're broke. They said we're broke when we were 1 trillion in debt. We print the money. The money goes into the economy. That is how this works. It's not something to take advantage of without thinking about what we're spending it on, without thinking about the inflationary aspects of it. But we need to see through these myths that they're using to cause a lot of damage and a lot of harm. And I think we need to open our eyes about what's really going on. Now you've got the Farm Bureau saying don't shut it down. These are people that obviously supported Trump. They're saying we can't go another month without assistance. So there's a lot of people that are going to be hurt by what they're doing right now. I don't know how they're going to come out of it, but I do know that people like Tim Burchett don't understand what the hell is going on. And the people that do, which in my opinion are Bannon and Musk are not looking out for our best interests. So I hope what you'll take out of this is that there is another way to look at our country's financial situation, and the fear mongering about the debt by people like Marsha Blackburn, who don't understand it, who just think debt bad, right? It sounds bad. Debt bad. You don't want debt. Well, debt is how the economy works. I have some debt. Do you have debt? I'm sure you do. We take on debt because that's how it goes. It's not like once upon a time when it used to be pinned to a gold coin or, or whatever else, which even then, by the way, that was just an agreement that we all made with each other about what something was worth. And that's, again, still where we are. It's just taking on a different form. So it doesn't mean unlimited spending. What it means is the debt is not what we should be thinking about. Inflation is what we should be thinking about. And we should not be cutting Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security to make inequality worse at a time when it's already at Gilded Age levels. So we should not put Elon Musk in charge, and we should not make him speaker. I know that should go without saying. And now you're seeing people like Kinzinger sort of inflame the rift that's potentially growing between Trump and Elon by calling him President Musk.
But look, President Musk this morning made it clear, with all his vast government experience, which is basically he became rich on the federal government, that he doesn't want Republicans to pass this. And seemingly Vice President Trump kind of backed him up then at that point. And
so that's what they're doing now. They're calling him President Musk and Vice President Trump, which is actually probably pretty smart. And he's absolutely right that Musk has grown his empire with billions from the federal government. Is he going to give all that back? I tend to doubt it. Here are some images that show that. At the bottom, you see Musk empire funded with $4.9 billion in government subsidies. There's a CNN article about all the money that he got from our government. Is he going to give that back? Is he going to stop taking that? Is that part of what's on the chopping block? I doubt it. I don't think so. So the point is, they are not serious about the debt. And yes, we should do away with the debt ceiling. And so if the Dems can come out of this by taking Trump up on his offer to abolish the debt ceiling so that they can't use this as a gun to hold to our heads every time this comes up going forward, I think that would be a positive. Anyway, I hope this is helpful. Fill social media with President Musk. Let me see what you guys say. President Musk and the useful idiot. Let's see. We should be thinking about spending creates opportunities, not destroying people. That's correct. They always lie. Talk about the threat of removing FDIC insurance from the banks. Yes, this is another important point. FDIC insurance, which has basically been put in place in the wake of crashes because banks do risky things. And then when the market crashes, inevitably as a result, we have to bail them out. So it's privatized gains and socialized losses. And so one of the things that has now been put in place to keep that from happening is, they have to keep a certain amount of cash on hand to make sure that our money is there when we want it, and to stop runs on banks and to keep us more secure in our banking. Well, Trump now wants to cut them loose and do away with the FDIC and make it so that they can be riskier, make riskier bets, which will inevitably lead to another crash. So that's a terrible idea. And there's a theme here, right? Everything they do, Republicans and Trump and Elon, everything they want to do is going to enrich themselves and the people at the top. And that's the stuff we need to push back on. And actually, yesterday you saw the beginnings of a crash start to happen. Yesterday was a terrible day in the market when they realized, these guys might be serious about not funding the government and potentially eventually defaulting. The debt ceiling is going to be a whole other fight. And I want to close here by talking about ultimately what they are about is no government. What they want is no government. They don't want to pay taxes. They don't want this sort of agreement that we make with each other to fund roads, schools, public schools, libraries, parks by chipping in for our taxes. They don't want any of that to happen. They want to keep all their money. And as FDR once said, Republican leadership is not against the way we have done the job. Republican leadership is against the jobs being done. That was FDR. That's what he said. That's how he saw things. And now you've got Mark Andreessen, who's one of the tech billionaires supporting Trump, saying that we need to reverse FDR. They want to dismantle the social compact. I don't want to say safety net. I don't want to say welfare state, but the compact, the agreement that we have with each other, that in this great country, we all chip in and it lifts up the bottom and it creates a society that we can all benefit from. That's not socialism. That is a hybrid of some socialist ideas and some capitalist ideas, which is always what this country has been. And it doesn't make you a socialist to want to address inequality. And in fact, in the long run, that will make capitalism healthier. It will make our economy healthier. And we need a balance. And right now that balance is too far out of whack towards the top, towards greed. And this fight about the budget right now is where it's playing out. Can you agree that government had gotten too big? Its intended purpose was solely to protect our rights and freedoms from foreign and domestic foes. That was not its only purpose, first of all. And has it gotten too big? I mean, in some ways, sure. But a big part of when it got bigger was after the Depression, when we needed to pull out of a depression, and we did that through government programs that provided housing, that, put people to work. And so you're saying it got too big. And I would like for you to send me some specifics. I mean, I think this is the problem. We speak in generalities, right? And in fact, if you look at, the amount of jobs in the federal government, it actually hasn't changed that much over the last 60, 70 years since, the increase, the FDR increase, which was popular and did a lot of good. And so if you want to talk about ways that the federal government has gotten too big, I mean, I think the military is a bloated budget and we should be looking at cutting that. Are you down with that? Like, what ways has it gotten too big? We say this in generalities, and sure, yeah, I'm agreeing with that in a general statement, but what are you talking about? Because Tim Burchett will say this all the time, but he never gets specific about what he means. He never talks about what he wants to cut. And he couldn't. And he never gets pressed on it. So yes, sure, federal government too big, sure. But there are things that it does that I think are really important. And I think I think it's patriotic to appreciate that the federal government does some things really well. We have a military that protects us. We create these roads, right? We decide what our priorities are and we invest in them. I think we need universal health care. I think we need Medicare for all. So in that way, I think it's not big enough. We're the only country without universal health care. We're the only developed country where you can go bankrupt if you get sick, or, we think about, our copays and our deductibles. And meanwhile, our life expectancy is a lot lower than other countries where the federal government is actually bigger. And we pay a lot more than they do. We are an outlier on this chart that is a real shame. Health expenditures versus life expectancy. So in this way, my answer to your question would be no, it's not too big. It's actually should be bigger, Kansas mama. So let's get specific. Let's not talk in generalities. My answer is in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. You say median TN household makes like $60K a year. Let's see what else you're saying. Free healthcare doesn't mean good healthcare. A lot of other countries will complain about the quality of the free services. Okay, but here's my trump card for that point that I hear quite often. How many of those countries, Kansas Mama, want to get rid of their universal healthcare? Here's a chart. On the left, you can see at the bottom, there's a few things on here, but at the bottom, you can see universal healthcare start dates and the year when these countries started universal healthcare. And then right next to it, you can see universal healthcare end dates. How many of them have gotten rid of that? The answer is 0. So universal healthcare is pretty popular. And if you talk to Canadians about their healthcare system, which I know we fearmonger about that all the time, they're not trying to get rid of their universal healthcare. Now, how we do it, that's a fair conversation to have. And, even though I agree with Bernie on a lot of things, I'm not out here advocating for getting rid of private insurance entirely. Some people would disagree with me on that. On the left, I believe we need something like what we have with our education system, where we have a baseline for everybody, that everybody has access to a certain level of coverage. And then if you want private insurance on top of that, you can go get it. Just like if you want a private school, you can go to a private school. But we all pay in and we cover everybody to a certain degree. And my personal experience going to Columbia, Tennessee, where remote area medical was giving free health coverage to people, and people were sleeping in a parking lot at 5 a.m. to see a doctor for the first time all year to get checkup, glasses, tooth pulled. Like, we look like a third world country. It was horrifying. And so we shouldn't have people sleeping in parking lots to see doctors. Tennessee's number 1 in medical bankruptcies. That's outrageous. We shouldn't have that. So we can talk about, how we do it, or, and no system's perfect, obviously. But the idea that we shouldn't cover everybody, I just completely fundamentally disagree with. And I wouldn't brag on the education system. It's gone downhill. See, these are all just talking points from Republicans. Like, that's what you're dishing out. And yes, our public schools have some problems, but actually, I think something like 75 to 80% of the country likes their public school. It's the idea of public schools that you have issues with because of what you're told all the time. People don't like government public schools in general, but they like their own. And so it's only gone downhill, so to speak, because we don't fund it properly. In Tennessee, we're at the bottom. In other states that properly fund it, they do a lot better. But abolishing the public education system is another thing that is not popular. So the idea that public education is not a solution, people don't agree with that. And yeah, I see it in person with schools too. My kids are in school. I have 2 kids, so you're talking to the wrong person there. Education has gone downhill because Republicans have stripped away funding. That is exactly right. What they do is, and this is exactly what's going on. I'm just going to bring it back to our continued resolution funding or conversation. What Republicans do is they underfund things, and then they point to them and say, see, they don't work. We got to scrap them and privatize them. And that's what they're trying to do with all this stuff. They're trying to defund government programs so that they can privatize these functions. The post office, public schools, and on and on and on. Privatization means steering money into their own pockets, doing away with competition with the government. For instance, healthcare is another example of that. And so it's privatization versus supporting the idea of public investment is fundamentally what we're talking about here. And if you're going to talk about why public education isn't where it should be, we have to talk about the fact that it's being underfunded in states like Tennessee. So that's the conversation that we're having. And this CR that's going on right now and the debt limit increase, like, it's really nefarious. And they're kind of winning this debate in the public sphere, which is why I felt it was important to come on and greed. It's greed. Greed or lowering of standards. Greed. The answer is greed. That's the answer. It's not like go into a public school and tell a principal, come to my public school with my kids and go to tell a principal, I think you've lowered your standards. I think your teachers aren't good enough. No, these are underpaid teachers. These are underfunded resources. And it's honestly sad that you would point at the people who have dedicated their lives to teaching kids in this country and say, you're just not good enough anymore. You've gotten worse. That's not what's going on. Believe in this country. Take a positive outlook on people, on human beings. And we should decide to invest in them. And we should support them. 1,500-page bill is what is nefarious. I mean, I see I'm just talking to the same person here over and over again with all these talking points. My answer to that would be that I don't like that either, but there's no version of this bill that Tim Burchett would support. He's a no on everything. It's not about the bill. And there's some good stuff in the bill. And sure, if you want to do away with some of the stuff in that bill, fine. I don't love how that works, but that's politics sometimes. But the point is, these people are not interested in what's in the bill. They just want shutdown, default. They want to say no. That's the point. And so they're just going to find an excuse. It'll be the 1,500-page bill. It'll be they dropped it too late. It'll be this. It'll be that. They'll just say no. They want to default. They want to crash the economy. They want to shut this place down because they don't believe in government. And I think the only antidote to that is a true understanding of the math and also a positive outlook on the American experiment, what we're trying to do, and each other. We have to come together. And that's their biggest fear. That's why they divide us through, the trans issue. That's why they divide us through the LGBTQ issues, through the school stuff, through, racist bullshit, immigration. They don't want us talking about the fact that, hey, you know what? If we come together and invest in ourselves and make government work for the people, that we can do a lot of great things. And maybe they shouldn't get to keep billions and billions and billions more dollars. I mean, the amount of wealth that these people are sitting on is absolutely outrageous. And all of this is just an effort for them to keep more of it. And that's what's going on here. Thanks for following, and we'll see you next time.